Measures that we think are incredibly important for New South Wales, a series of measures that in many cases we believe will make a major difference for this state. First of all, the government will introduce new laws banning hateful symbols and giving police greater powers to remove face coverings during public assemblies and demonstrations. The government will examine additional measures to further crack down on hateful slogans. Monday's legislation will make it a specific offence under New South Wales law to publicly display... I'll start that again. Monday's legislation will specifically outlaw terrorist symbols such as the ISIS flags and indeed all banned terrorist organisations in New South Wales for public display either in the streets, during a public demonstration or in houses, anywhere. The legislation will give police more powers to require someone suspected of committing an offence during a public assembly to remove face coverings. Currently, removal can only be required if they believe that the person's identity or the person is in the midst of committing an indictable offence. We'll change the law so it can be for any offence, which is particularly important in the context of clamping down on hate speech so that police can be in a position to identify who is responsible for offensive conduct, hateful slogans or racist behaviour. We'll also make it very clear that horrific recent events have shown that the chant "globalize the Intifada" is hate speech and it encourages violence in our community. The chant will be banned alongside other hateful comments and statements made in our community. Now, it's very important that we chart a legislative path that holds up as far as the Constitution is concerned. So the Attorney-General will ask the Legislative Assembly Committee on Law and Safety to conduct a quick investigation and report back to the Attorney-General about changes to the law and hate speech legislation that should specifically be included in the state's the hate speech bills that we passed last year. Now, this process is important because we need to make sure that if it's subject to a constitutional challenge in the High Court, it's very clear that we've followed a process by which a committee has investigated it, spoken to stakeholders and recommended changes to the New South Wales government. But I will insist that Globalise the Intifada is included in that list. I will insist that Globalise the Intifada is included in that list of hateful, violent rhetoric in New South Wales. I'm going to pass over to the Attorney-General now, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Premier. Governments have no more sacred a duty than to keep their citizens safe. People of New South Wales, every single one of them, regardless of where they live or what community they come from, have a right to be living in a peaceful society and not be interfered with, not have to be subject to racism and hatred and violence. That is our sacred mission. And we can't make people think what we want them to think. We can't force people to live together in harmony. We can ask them to do that. But for those very small few who decide that they won't do that, what is left at our disposal is strong legislation backed up by the best police force in the world.
Continuing expose of Anthony Albanese's history as a pro-Palestinian activist. I can reveal Albanese met with the late Palestinian president, Yasser Arafat, 2 years before he, Albanese, protested against Israel during the Second Intifada. And that was the violent Palestinian uprising that included terror attacks. Our now Prime Minister took part in a rally in Sydney where Israeli and American flags were burned. Albanese also met with Arafat, the terrorist turned president of the PLO, in Ramallah 2 years earlier in 1998. Unlike other politicians who met with Arafat, Albanese did not meet the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, it was Benjamin Netanyahu, or the Israeli President, Ezer Weizmann, on his trip to the Middle East. Albanese was on a trip sponsored by the Palestine Liberation Organization, and it was all expenses paid, including flights and accommodation. Sources who knew Albanese at the time told me he was starry-eyed and fawning at the prospect of meeting Yasser Arafat. Here is a photograph that captured that moment. You can see Albanese sitting on the far left of the screen. Next to him is a former Labor MP, Leo Macleay, who was strongly anti-Israel. Then in the centre, there's Arafat. To the right of Arafat is one of his advisors, who then sits next to the former Palestinian delegate, or ambassador in inverted commas, Ali Kazak. And then on the far right of your screen is Joe Hockey, who was also on the trip. Joe Hockey's father was born in the Palestinian territories, and he and Albanese set up the Australian Parliamentary Friends of Palestine group together. National Party MP Peter McGauran, who'd worked on a kibbutz in Israel and had visited Israel on many occasions, was also present. In the Second Intifada, Albanese in Parliament spoke about Israeli aggression.
Palestinians live with restrictions every day. Gaza and the West Bank are regularly closed, preventing Palestinians from going to work and creating a subsequent resentment. Roadblocks occur at regular intervals. The hotel in Ramallah, the City Inn, where I stayed with Peter Nugent, who's present here in the House, and also Joe Hockey, Peter McGauran and Leo Macleay, has been occupied by the Israeli Defence Force and used by snipers on the West Bank. Palestinians do not have equal rights in the Middle East.